These light beings, there were three of them, and I remember them kind of comforted me and communicating with me telepathically that it was going to be okay, told me that I had an opt-out in my soul contract. I had put this in there that I could go on from this point, or I could go back to my earthly life.
Today's audio was a bit rough, but we will have captions popping up on the screen when it is difficult to understand. It's an absolutely phenomenal interview, and I recommend sticking around to the end to see some of Argus's amazing artwork. Thank you for watching. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me. I am here today with Argus. Argus is a visionary artist and empath who's had a variety of spiritual experiences, including a near-death experience when he was 5 years old, out-of-body experiences, astral projections, prophetic dreams, and more. And so we're going to start today with the near-death experience he had at the age of 5. So welcome, Argus. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Would you like to just jump in wherever it makes sense to you, maybe at your earliest experience?
Yeah, sure. So I've had spiritual experiences like my whole life, but when I was 5, I contracted spinal meningitis. So I was basically running around in my living room, just playing as a regular 5-year-old would, and just started to get really strong. And it just kept getting worse and getting worse. And finally, I didn't know what was going on, but my mom came over and she saw me in distress and kind of screaming at that point. They checked my temperature and it was like 105. We have to get him to the hospital. So they rushed me over to the hospital in the car. I remember my uncle wrapping me in a blanket and getting in the car and getting to the hospital. And then it was just a lot of chaotic stuff happening with as far as checking my temperature, and they plunged me into an ice bath. They had to do a spinal tap, and that was really traumatic. So there were all these things going on, but I sort of lost consciousness at one point, and I ended up kind of in a coma, in and out for a couple of days. And during that time, I remember having this experience of these light beings that were around me. So I was sort of between being awake and asleep. I didn't die, but I was sort of in a coma. And these light beings, there were three of them, and I remember them just kind of comforted me and being, communicating with me telepathically that it was going to be okay. And basically, they told me that I had an opt-out in my contract, my soul contract is how I understood it, that I had put this in there that I could go on from this point, or I could go back to my earthly life. And I wanted to go back. I just remember saying, well, I want to go back to my family, my mom, my dad. So, yeah. And then 2 days later, I was out of it, but it was a really interesting experience to have that energy and those beings with me during that time. So, and after that, I remember my brain must have been altered, but I started to see when I was in kindergarten. After that, I'd be sitting in class and I'd have like a Native American Indian that would visit me. And the teacher would say, what are you daydreaming? Pay attention. And I was like going on these journeys with this Indian. So, when children are daydreaming, they, pay attention. I think there's a lot going on there and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But that was a pretty strong experience. And I think after that, I was sort of didn't have anything until later on when I was like 12, 13. I found out that I was adopted. And I heard my mom and my sister having a conversation about, well, what are we going to tell him? And I interceded, and they were like, well, we wanted to tell you, but you're adopted. And so that was a real shock to have that after 12. And it sort of started me on this quest for the truth, trying to find out what actually is going on. Why would they sort of do this, not tell me the truth? And I grew up Catholic, so my mom would send me to church, and I remember sitting there and being like, this doesn't make sense to me. On some level, I really understood that there was something more that was happening. And I started to look into a lot of metaphysical things. So it was like a spiritual awakening at the time. I was going, and this book called Pocket Guide to the Supernatural just sort of almost fell off the shelf. It was like in 1960. And I remember taking a look at it and like, wow, this is pretty interesting. The Catholic Church didn't make sense to me. Sort of like, I feel like in the church, there was like a seed of truth that I could feel within the religion, but I didn't really get it. I thought the energy was really sort of harsh, sermons and that sort of thing. So to see this book, it was very revealing to me because it had a lot of interesting topics in it, ESP, astral projection, all these sort of things. So I sort of just absorbed a lot of that like a sponge. It was very revealing.
So you grew up Catholic.
Right.
And then just really started questioning it sounds like. And then this other information about supernatural things kind of fell into your lap.
Right. Yeah, it was like, I kept kind of feeling like there's something more than just what's here that we can see. And so I began to just really investigate a lot of things. I read a lot of books on astral projection, Robert Monroe, that sort of thing, and had some out-of-body experiences. I started to experiment with that, and I could put myself into, that state between waking and dreaming, and actually had some out-of-body experiences, which were very startling to have, where I actually would wake up, I'd start to go to sleep, and then I would wake up and I was actually floating outside my body.
Wow.
So it wasn't like a near-death experience, but I was actually dreaming, and I woke up and I would see my body, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to just see what happens. And with that sort of thing, you have to use your mind and focus. So I focused on trying to go outside, and I actually went through the ceiling and was floating above my house. And it was very vivid, very real. The pine trees outside had like a glow to them. Everything had sort of like a glow. And I remember the moon was out, and I actually said, well, I'm going to just try going up to the moon. And I started, and that sort of thing, you go at the speed of thought. So what you think starts to happen. So I was just moving through space, and I got kind of scared. I was going pretty far out, and I said, I better get back. And as soon as I had that thought, I was back in my body and woke up.
So you didn't quite make it to the moon?
No, I got close, but it was, definitely not a dream. So, and I really, again, that just affirmed to me that there is more to the physical existence than what we see or perceive. So, and this was like, I was maybe 13 or 14.
That's just so fascinating to me that you had these out-of-body experiences. Did you see any of the beings that you did from your near-death experience?
No, I did not at that time. think there were some other times after that since then, but I didn't actually, like I did when near this area.
Mm-hmm.
But I had, again, it was just one after another almost in my teens with this. And there was no, there were only books back.
Right.
Wasn't internet, there wasn't Amazon. So a lot of my inquiries and investigation was just going to this bookstore and hoping there would be another metaphysics book available. They'd have an experience where it was like having a dream and you wake up dreaming. You realize you're dreaming. And I was in some place, it looked like a hotel or something. I wasn't sure what it was, but it was very clear. And I saw the people behind the counter. All the details were very clear as far as like the interior place. And then I just sort of forgot about it. But a year later in our French club, we went on a trip. I'd never been up there. When we got to Quebec, we got in front of the hotel and got out of the bus and stairs. And I went into the lobby and I dropped my luggage just like sat there with my mouth open. And my friend was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I've been here before." Like this was the same place that I had the dream like a year later, down to the detail. And the one thing that was interesting in the dream, the people behind the counter sort of like, I think they saw me. They saw something because the look in their face was like, "What is that?" There was something moving. So I had a lot of that sort of thing.
One other question I had for you is in your writings that you sent to me, I read that you actually had an experience when you were 4 years old when light beings appeared to you. Is that something that you want to share about?
Yeah, because I do have memories of being like 3, pretty young, and just having these, and I think maybe these were the same beings. I call them the spirit team. I feel like, kind of make a joke about it, that we drew spiritual straws, and I got the short one. And they said, "Okay, it's your your turn to go down to earth. We're just going to observe." But it was kind of that feeling. I feel like they've been with me as far back as I can remember. And so they would just be there. And there was always, I guess they were like coaching me maybe, but it was always telepathic. And they would just give me coaching and reassurance that things were going to be okay, that I was on a journey and a mission. And it was like lessons. It would be like this continual spiritual lessons happening with them. And I do remember them talking about healing and Jesus, and that was kind of like the mysteries of the universe continuing while I was in body to keep me abreast what reality is, what real, the other reality.
Do you remember any of those things now?
A little bit, but mostly it was just sort of, I can't intellectually really put it into words. So it was more like an internal teaching and basic truth that love is the predominant force person, that we're all, here to learn and we're on a journey. But it's all connected. The big thing about everything beat.
I love that. And I remember you said that Jesus, he told you that you would be going through some hardships and not to remember or not to forget who.
Right. That was one of the messages from them, was that I would go, they called it going dim. And I would lose that connection that I had at that time. And it was just feel like children in general, very pure.
Yeah.
And they're connected just the way it is. And some more so than others. But yeah, they were just telling me, "You're going to forget, but we'll be here." And then I think that the event when I was 5 years old was just sort of like, okay, I'm coming back to reunite and have a reconnection with my spirit team at that time. So yeah, it was pretty amazing.
So do you think that because you had these experiences when you were so young, that that's part of the reason why you were so quick to question the Catholic faith?
Yes. Yeah. I feel like there was some sort of foundation and memory going on there. So that when I said I would attend church and I would be like, this just doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
It didn't feel right. I was always very empathic and very tuned into people's feelings, and just the energy that I was experiencing whilst there was very harsh. And the priest, the message was harsh. And I just felt like, I call it the seed of truth, that I could sort of see through all of the parts of the church, the dogma, I guess you call it, that there are basic truths in that. That was part of the being Catholic experience. And I think I was 13 or 14 and I just stopped the church and just did a lot more of my own connecting, what I call it, with the divine myself.
Okay, so we left off when you were a teenager and you're having out of body experiences. And so how did your life progress from there?
Well, I just kind of went through my life. Basically, I didn't do a lot more investigating, but I was always drawn to spiritual things. And I remember in college, there was a meditation and studying esoteric philosophy. I was gravitating towards that. I was part of this. We would sit there every week and meet. We didn't really know each other, but it became like this meditation that we're focusing on. A leader would call it the expansion of love and the conscious mind expanding. And that kept me sort of connected, having that, but I was just busy with studies. So, a lot of my life was just not so much onto the spirit, and it wasn't until like I started to do, as I was growing up, a lot of, because of the childhood trauma, I was just doing a lot of going psychotherapy and healing, that sort of thing, going to healers and Reiki, having a lot of, it felt like a connection of those types of interact healers. And so maybe a few years after that, I had an experience where my dad had passed away, and suddenly, and I was going through the grief process. And then, but I was going to healers and really just kind of doing a lot of healing inside. And it was about a year anniversary after his death, and I was working with crystals and sort of thing. And I was doing a prayer, and I remember feeling his energy into the room. And it was certain it was him. I could feel him, but he was totally healed out of any childhood trauma. It was like he was whole. It was like if someone had gone away to a healing retreat, totally healed out of all traumas. He was in that state. And I remember just feeling this really strong heart communication from him. And the communication he said was that, is now I can be the father that I couldn't be when I was, and I was just crying and just feeling this amazing connection at that time. And I remember I didn't really mourn him after that. I really felt that he was with. So that was really powerful and an affirmation to me about people transforming after they die. And then also being there close, but not in body. So that was a really powerful awakening.
Wow, what a beautiful experience. Thank you for sharing that. I know that hearing things like that can be so comforting to people who have lost loved ones.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. And that was something that I hadn't, have been focusing on, but I hadn't really planned on happening, but it happened to be the year after he had wedding. So it was pretty amazing. So yeah, it wasn't really for a while, having a lot of experience, but they were very dramatic going on. But I did do just a lot of introspection and continued studying and healing experiences. Was really into just energy. But later on, I had some other pretty strong experiences and things that would happen. There was a time when I was back probably right after 9/11. I didn't have any worries. I wasn't working. So I was just basically just going along and doing a lot of tuning into my heart. And so I was reading the Cryon material and really tuned into that. Ended up I'd wake up during the day and I would just tune into my heart and I would say, all right, where do you want to go today? What do you want to do? What is your heart telling you? And this one day I ended up going to the beach, and there weren't many people there, but it was one of those days where it was kind of hazy, and I was just laying there and looking out at the horizon, and I saw this, it was like a mist out on the horizon. It was like a glow, and I just followed it around and thought it might have been a cloud, but it was actually a huge, what they call a sun rainbow or a sun circle. And usually they're pretty close. But this was almost to the horizon. It was so large. I followed it around and it was a complete circle. And wow, I feel the energy of that. It was like a portal between worlds. And I was looking around, nobody else was noticing this. They were just walking around, and it's like, doesn't anybody see what's happening here? And it was like, wow, this is amazing. And again, it was more the feeling and the energy that was coming through that I could feel rather than the actual vision, but also the energy. So amazing coming through there. So that sort of leads in another experience that happened on the next day or so. I was just tuning into my heart, and I was laying down for a nap, and I put on some music, and it was this artist called Kamal. It was called Dolphin Dreams or something there. And I was sort of fell asleep. I was half asleep. And again, it was one of those waking dreams. I was driving in a convertible, and I remember Harry Potter. They had that game, and there were those round balls that were whizzing by. There were two of those hovering around me while I was in this car, but they weren't exactly mechanical. They were more energetic. It was similar to that sort of humming, buzzing bumblebee thing where they were just following me. And I was a little bit like, what is this? So they ended up positioning themselves directly, the two of them, in front of my chest. And they emanated this beam into my heart. And from there, I got sort of ejected out of my dream body because I was dreaming and was floating above the earth and space. And there were all these sort of magnetic grids, fine grids that were there. And there was a figure in the background that I didn't know if it was Jesus or Cryon, who was part of the channeling, but some sort of a benevolent figure. But I was floating in basically a sea of love, just absolute, like being wrapped in a warm light. And it was no time, no space, but just this experience. And I don't know how long it lasted, but it seemed like it was forever, basically. And then I heard this voice in my head that just said, come home. And then I was back in my body, and woke up. But I woke up still, my whole body was vibrating. It actually was vibration. And this, I call it universal love energy. And I was just moved and crying. And I remember thinking, this is why people love to fall in love. The world seems different when you're in that space. It was like that, but like 1,000 times stronger. So I was like, okay, I know I love to fall in love. It definitely changed my life and my outlook on life after that. It was like an initiation or spiritual awakening happening. Not really planned, but I think because I was in a space where I wasn't distracted with things I had to do on a daily basis. I didn't have to really work. I had a job, but I didn't do much. I could focus on just being in a hard state, and really beautiful.
What an amazing experience. So you mentioned that people love to fall in love, and you realized that during your experience because of the amazing love that you felt. I've heard some spiritual teachers say that enlightenment is basically falling in love with reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that
makes sense. Living from that constant place of being in love with everything.
Right.
You mentioned you saw some magnetic grids. Do you know what those were or what they were for?
Well, interesting, because the readings I was doing from the Cryon channeling, that's what they were talking about, was these grids, electromagnetic grids that surround the planet and that feed the planet energy and interact with it. So a lot of the channeling material talking about that thing, that the frequency of the planet is changing over time, and that these grids are part of that change.
Interesting. For anyone that's not familiar, could you briefly explain what the Cryon books are?
Yeah, they're channeled material by Lee Carroll, and he still has a website, but he had been connecting with a being called Cryon for many years and bringing that through. So just a vast amount of information that he put in. But now he has a website, and I don't think there's so much writing as much, video.
So Argus, I have to ask you, based on all of your experiences and your research, what would you say is the purpose of life, and why are we here?
Well, I feel like I'm still finding out that, but I feel like the meaning of life, it's very, again, there's a soul contract, and there is everything sort of laid out for us, but we don't so thoroughly remember that. But there is sort of a plan in place. At this point, I feel like the meaning of life is really to enjoy life and live. I know earlier on I would be trying to, because I know spiritually I found the vibrations to be very hard as younger, as sensitive, and I didn't really want to stay a lot of the time. It's really challenging.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Right. Yeah. And now, after having these experiences, I feel like that, life is to be cherished. We're here for a reason, and to enjoy our distance here. And also that the vibration of love is the highest in the universe, and I'm here bend that energy and to come from a place of love and help evolve the planet along.
Is there anything else, any other experiences or anything else that you wanted to share?
Well, the one I just shared about, again, it was sort of an out-of-body experience, I would call it, where I wasn't really asleep, but having that sort of waking experience just impacts your life. I think it was May 2010, and maybe I was reading. So I've been reading a lot of material. I'd never stopped trying to read spiritual material or thing. But when I was reading this, discussing how, our being is natural state is like the sun. We're, all knowing, all powerful, our soul or our higher self. And I was house sitting for a friend, and I just dropped them off at apartment. I was sitting there, and I phoned a friend of mine who was pretty close with, and we would talk about spiritual energy, cosmic energy. And we were talking about the Sedona technique, the technique that was started quite a while back and involves shifting your perspective and letting go of your thinking process and trying to focus in on openness and higher frequency. And we were just having conversation about that. And then I was driving home from the airport and sitting in traffic a bit. And all of a sudden, it was like if you were looking through cellophane or something that was foggy, and that was sort of all of a sudden taken off. It was that sort of experience. It was unplanned. And I'm trying to put it into perspective, but I was basically awake and conscious, but also I had a different perspective, and I was there was like two of me. So there was part of me that was sort of floating above me, and there was part of me in the car. And the perspective would be like if you were on the ground and you were in an airplane at the same time. Your perspective is totally different looking down at the earth than when you're on the ground. So I was having both at the same time. And then I looked in front of me, and the license plate on the car in front of me said Sedona. And I was like, what is going on? This is crazy. We're just talking about Sedona technique. Then all of a sudden, here is this license plate that says Sedona. So it was really kind of reality taking a total different. So it's kind of difficult to describe when you have, like an experience like that. There's no words that can really adequately describe it, the feeling, but I know that the feeling that I had with this other part of myself, I'm going to say higher self or maybe soul self that I was experiencing, that entity or that part of myself, it felt very clear and very expanded and very, I want to say, joyful. There was no fear or anything like that. And very expanded space. And the other part of that was that I experienced feeling from that perspective, absolute gratitude, and saying that every experience, from the time I was born that I would have should be valued and cherished. It's a special experience. And I didn't have that perspective. But this energy, wherever I was in that perspective, that was the experience. And it lasted about maybe 3 days. So it was little, and I wasn't really working at the time. Fortunately, I had time to myself. I was just doing artwork and teaching art. So I was able to just be in that kind of double race, and then it faded. But it was, so that one was one where I really feel like impacted my life and my perspective a lot. Life is about definitely something, they say be in the moment, appreciate what you have, appreciate people around you. Every single experience, even if we perceive it as maybe being negative, is something that is cherished, be cherished and safe. So I guess, my perspective changed as I've gotten older, and I'm here now.
Oh, I love that. So I was gonna say, it sounds like that was quite a life-changing experience. What ways did you see your life changing after that?
I think it was just the way that I go through my day. Yeah, it was just being in the experience itself was so intense, strong that when I kind of came out of it, I was like, wow, I want to have that back again, that perspective. But it was so, disconcerting in a way because I couldn't function like my rational mind could not understand or perceive shocking. So, but yet it was such a beautiful experience. I wanted to go into it. I feel like that I didn't put so much pressure on myself or things. I looked at things differently. I looked at people differently, less judgment, well, and just more of an appreciation about my life.
Well, first, I want to say that I am so glad that you were willing to come on and share your story. And I love your message about life being something to cherish and about being grateful for the experiences. I think it's such a powerful message.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. And thank you. I know you've shared about your experience as well, personally with things. So that really resonated for me when I watched your own personal.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure.
And I really would love to give you a chance to share about your artwork. And I'm really curious about these pieces that you have behind you. Would you be up for sharing what any of them are?
Yes, sure. So, well, just a little bit of background about my art. I've done, art my whole life, was always drawing. And I'm so glad my parents were encouraging for me. They saw that I had some artistic talent. They were really great about just encouraging that. But there was a time when I was maybe 7 or 8 and I was fascinated with this swan. I kept drawing this picture of a swan with pastels reflected in the water. And I just remember it would, at that time, being I felt like I was projecting or as part of that image that I was drawing. I felt like almost it's a part of me, but so there was a contest at school and then said, bring in a piece of art. So I worked on it and ended up bringing it in and putting it in as part of the contest. And it was a day later, they were talking about winners and they called me up and said, did you have help with this? Did parents help you? Because it was so beyond my level of talent they thought I should have. And I said, no, I did this myself. And they didn't believe that I could. But basically, I got disqualified from the contest because they felt like I didn't do the drawing and that I had helped. And I was devastated. So I went home crying. I went to my dad, my mom, and I said, they disqualified me from the test. And my dad got real like, okay, I'm going to go down. And he went down and confronted them and said, this kid did his drawing himself. He didn't have help from us. And they still didn't believe him.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So, I was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 or it was 4th grade, whatever age. But so was this really, as an artist, growing up, it was kind of like this message. If you're going to be real good, then people are going to kind of this weird message. And it sort of went with me for a while, but, I just continued art anyway. I always got support, but it's interesting. I looked up later in my life about the swan and, the swan is symbolic for transformation and spirituality. So it was interesting that I chose as it must have been one of my power animals, maybe, or something. But so that's just, that was an early my art. But my background, after college was I was into science and that sort of thing. So I ended up doing a double major, and I got my training. I went to grad school for medical and biological illustration. So I went through 2.5 years of training. So a lot of my technique that I learned was from that, because they were heavily into more computer science and computer art. A lot of it was done by hand. So a lot of the training I got from that and carried through, and it sort of carries into some of my work now. So the pieces that are behind me, part of my technique that I've worked on is using color pencil and black paper. And I don't know if you can see a lot of the detail there, but that's the technique that I use. But a lot of my art, as I've gone on and had more spiritual experiences, a lot of it is part of my experience connecting with the energies that I feel, universal energies. And so, I feel like when I'm working on pieces now, I do sort of focus and channel my energy, universal energy, into the piece. So that for people resonate with that, they can feel that.
I was wondering if some of those were from some of your spiritual experiences.
Yeah. It all ties together.
Mm-hmm.
So now just being more open and being as I am, it does tie into that. Some of those out of body and those spiritual experiences coming through, being expressed into the art.
Can I ask you about the one on, I guess it would be on your left on the bottom, what that one is?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those pieces are that one I call Soul Star. And it's from an original piece that was black paper and color pencil that I used. I have a computer, and it can take the original art, and then it's called a kaleidoscope. And so I can manipulate the image into either a 5-pointed star or a star, and then work with the settings until I get, the thing I.
Mm-hmm.
And so usually when I arrive upon something, I'll get a really strong feeling when I see the image. It's like, okay, yeah, that's it. And then that's what I go with. And then I have them printed, but really good printer that I work with. And then I can go back in. It's on art paper, and I can further enhance the pieces. So they're not just plain prints. I'm able to still go back and work with it, my energy and universal energy. And so that's what I end up doing.
Well, Argus, thank you so much for sharing. Could you share with the viewers where they can find you, or if they're interested in your artwork? Do you sell your artwork?
Yeah. Well, currently what I'm doing is my website. I'm updating everything and putting a lot of my newer work on. But what people can do is they can email me. I think I sent my email.
Yes, I have your email, so I'll put that in the description.
Right. And if you want to get in touch with me, they can definitely just email me, and I can send them a link to the website. Look at more of the art, because there's a lot more that I have here.
Yeah. And when you're done working on the website, if you want to email me that link, I can put it in the description.
Oh, yeah.
Later on, too.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. So do you have any final messages for the viewers before we wrap things up here?
Well, I'm really just grateful to be able to be here and to share, my experiences. And I'm hoping that, that people are just, open and resonates and help somebody with their own journey. I'd be really, really happy about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being willing to put your story out there. I feel really honored that you wanted to come on my channel and share your story. And I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, same here, Melissa. Yeah, it's been great. I'm just so appreciative.
Thank you for watching the Love Covered Life podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and comment with your thoughts and opinions, and check the description box for the links to my free community where I share lots of resources, my Pay What You Can community where we do classes and challenges together, my TikTok, Instagram, my Clips channel, and lovecoveredlife.com where I share my paintings. Thank you so much for your support.